Robyn Vincent. We just heard from a libertarian in Michigan who wants to use the free market to bring down costs. But these days, it's more common to hear liberals and Democrats use the word affordability. In November, Democrats ran across the country and won on reducing the cost of living. Last month, Senate Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer unveiled a plan to make America more affordable. But what exactly is an affordability agenda? And how are politicians trying to resolve the affordability crisis for you and me? E.J. Dionne is a New York Times opinion writer, a professor at Georgetown University, and a Brookings Senior Fellow. He's here to discuss all this. E.J., welcome back.
Always great to be with you and on DET. Thank you.
We love having you. How would you describe the affordability agenda?
Well, I think it's interesting. I listened to some of the interview with Jared, and I think one of the problems with the conversation, and he said some things I agree with. I don't think government should promote monopolies, for example, and there are things that government could pull out of to do less of. I think the question should be, whose side is government on? What's it trying to do? And I think what you've seen are a lot of different ways. There are different baskets in which government can help people afford what they need. And there are some areas where you simply have to have government help, government subsidies, because for lots of not just poor people, but middle-class people, certain costs are out of control for them. Yeah. We subsidize healthcare. Because unless you work for an employer that provides you with health care, the cost of buying health care on the private market are prohibitive. Everybody in their life, I want every politician to be on that private market for 6 months or a year and try to, help their families. And so Obamacare has helped about 45 million people who didn't have it get health care. Childcare is now out of the reach. I heard Sam cite that number of 22,000. Even if you can get it cheaper than that, imagine costs like that for a family earning $150,000, let alone somebody poorer. If they have got 2 or 3 kids, what the costs of that are. And that's why there is a call for universal childcare in New York. Governor Hochul and Mayor Mamdani are actually teaming up. She's a more moderate Democrat. He's a Democratic socialist. They agree that government should do more to provide health care. I think there are other areas where government can temporarily freeze costs. Mikey Sherrill, the new governor of New Jersey, is talking about that with electricity prices. There is a big fight in the country over all these data centers that come in. And they really jack up, they use so much power, they jack up the costs. Should we think about redistributing the costs of electricity, where those data centers that are actually responsible for some of the inflation should pick up more of the costs so homeowners, average people, can pay less. So I think there are a lot of areas where you can't control everything, and price controls across the board have a mixed record at best. But there are areas where government can make a material difference, and I think that's where we should be looking.
You mentioned something, this idea of whose side the government is on. Do you think Democrats are doing a good job of communicating that? Are they using the affordability issue to bring people in by saying we are on your side?
Well, I think, any assessment of the Democrats these days is negative just because Trump won the last election and most Democrats have not gotten over that. And so they're all mad and they want Democrats to fight back harder. And I have sympathy for that. But the fact is that where they have run actual campaigns over the last year or so since the last election, they've been fairly effective at it. Governor Spanberger of Virginia has put out had some concrete ideas on housing and elsewhere. Mikey Sherrill did it. Mamdani did it. his whole agenda, you can argue with the specifics, but his whole agenda was directed at affordability, with free buses, which, by the way, are not as uncommon as people think. I live in a well-off suburban county outside of D.C. Montgomery County, Maryland has free buses. You can have free bus lines. The child care, obviously, which I've already mentioned. Rent freezes, they probably can't work forever. You need some market rents sufficient to encourage building housing, but they can be a short-term fix. So I think you have seen where they have done it, Democrats be effective. I think at a national level, Democrats are searching for ways to have plausible ideas that people can relate to. I do think one of the big issues rising in the country, and you're starting to see Republicans talk about it too, are those data centers. I think that's one area where we're going to have a big national conversation. Childcare is a conversation we have needed to have, and I think that's going to be a central issue going forward.
Well, you're talking about issues that absolutely unite people across the political spectrum. We are certainly seeing this with the pushback of data centers, and we see it too with things like childcare. When it comes to unity, would you say that the Democratic Party is unified on the affordability issue?
Well, they are broadly unified, yes, and they know that it is perhaps their best issue. And by the way, the affordability issue should be talked about in tandem with the issue of wages and what people earn. One of the issue is, are incomes going up faster than inflation or not? And so I think the affordability issue also provides a portal into the larger issue of how income and wealth is distributed. By the way, on wealth taxes, I'm glad Sam brought them up. Most Americans pay a wealth tax. It's called a property tax. 2/3 of Americans own their own homes. I think the question about wealth taxes is, why is it that middle-class people pay a lot bigger wealth tax than the people who are very, very wealthy? And I think there's room for conversation about that. But yes, I think what we want to figure out are where can government act in a kind of an emergency way, and where can we build some long-term structures, as in childcare, as in higher ed, another area that's very important, where things that people need, essentials people need, can be more within their reach.
EJ, Dionne, it's not just affordability, though, that's a buzzword right now in politics. It's also something more idealistic, and that is abundance. Here's Mayor Zohran Mamdani discussing them both in his inaugural address.
City Hall will deliver an agenda of safety, affordability, and abundance, where government looks and lives like the people it represents, never flinches in the fight against corporate greed, and refuses to cower before challenges that others have deemed too complicated.
An abundance agenda. This is something that's advocated by journalists like Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein. It's meant to create a liberalism that builds, one that focuses not just on passing policy, but implementing it, whether that's housing or new energy projects or healthcare services. EJ, is abundance about building more, while affordability is about charging less, or is that too simple?
Yeah, for people interested, I wrote a long piece back when I was on the Washington Post about the abundance debate, and I find it interesting. I particularly like that last line of the Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson book, that we need a liberalism that builds. I agree with that. Abundance has divided Democrats, but also I think has been a unifying theme. A certain part of the left has been very skeptical of abundance if it is defined only as deregulation. Folks like Jared, I think, would like to embrace a certain kind of abundance, arguing that it's all these regulations and court suits that get in the way of building things. And I think progressives should look at some of that, because there were rules that may have been created 25 years ago that don't make sense now. There are ways in which projects can be tied up in court forever, not because of, for progressive concerns, but because, say, a group of well-off people don't want moderate income housing in their neighborhoods. So I think that even parts of that deregulatory agenda are legitimate even for progressives. However, as the fact that Mamdani embraces it, I think suggests that, look, if you believe, as he does, as I do, that government can help solve problems, you need to reduce some of the encumbrances on government, some of the red tape. Why should it take 5 or 6 years to get something built? Are there ways of shortening the regulatory process to take into account environmental concerns and other legitimate concerns, but not take forever for government to act? And I think that's the part of abundance that unites people like Mamdani with people, more centrist in the Democratic sphere. So I see some real possibilities coming out of the abundance agenda.
E.J. Dionne, in the last minute we have here, when Democrats talk about deregulation, what are they not willing to deregulate that libertarians are?
Well, some of it's a matter of degree. I mean, I think we should start one thing about regulation as the basics. We may want companies to compete on price, but we don't want them to cut their prices by throwing poison in rivers. And I think that's a good model. Or we don't want companies to have products that injure or kill people out on the market. We want those recalled and fixed. And I think if you take sort of basics like that, the libertarians like to talk about sort of wildly, they suggest that sort of all regulation hampers business. It doesn't. Can you imagine if instead of having regulations, people could only stop pollution by suing everybody who throws stuff in the rivers? We have regulation because it's a more efficient way to serve the public interest. And I think that aspect of regulation must be defended. And that, yes, can you make the process simpler? Sure. Can you make it more efficient? Can you have people not waiting forever? Sure. Some of the regulations get tied up because businesses don't want them. They can cause inefficiencies. So efficiency is good, but that doesn't mean you can do away with regulation.
E.J. Dionne is a New York Times opinion writer, professor at Georgetown University, and senior fellow at Brookings. E.J., thanks so much for joining us again.
A joy to be with you. Thank you.
It's the Metro on WDET. Coming up, Detroit Red is the lesser-known version of civil rights leader Malcolm X. We'll hear from a historian about his connection to Michigan and origins in Detroit. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. We'll be right back after the news.